Sound became for us a very integral part of telling a story. And when we walked into the re-recording studios where the sound men were for the first time and began to tell them what we wanted and how we wanted and what did they think and so on, and they found people who cared. Previous to that, no one really cared about sound. It was left to the sound department to do it, and they were unsung heroes with nobody really appreciating what they could do if given an opportunity.
The sound post-production of the studio was now run by James G. Stewart, who came into our story at the very beginning as one of RKO's first sound technicians. For his work on Kane, he earned one of his 9 Academy nominations.
The motion picture business as a whole had no concept of the possibilities of sound, and you fall into a pattern. It's difficult to deviate from that pattern because it costs money. And nobody wanted to spend money. With Orson, deviation from the pattern was possible because he demanded it, and I was capable of, I had enough imagination to concede, also enough technical knowledge. See, Orson did not have the technical knowledge. He had the imagination and the concept, but how to do it.
Charlie, what time is it?
11:30.
New York? I said, what time is it in New York?
11:30.
At night?
Bulldog's just gone press.
Well, hooray for the bulldog. Gee, 11:30. Shows are just getting up. People are going to nightclubs and restaurants. Of course, we're different because we live in a palace.
Whoa.
Wells was the director, producer, and co-writer of Kane. And he'd also decided to play the central character himself. When he made Kane, he was 25 years old. The character of Kane ages from a young man to a decrepit invalid in his 70s. This transformation became the responsibility of an unqualified young man working as a sweeper of hair in the RKO makeup department.
I was so elated to find that he was coming to RKO studio. And I made all kinds of plans and to see him and so on. And I had the opportunity. And Orson went around seeing in every department. He wanted to acquaint himself with movie making. I had a little corner all to myself. And in that place, I had clay and I had my tools and everything else. And I would spend as much time as I can creatively because it was important. Orson saw me playing with noses and ears and things like that, and he wanted to know if I could completely change his face. I said, sure. So he said, you're absolutely sure? I said, I'm absolutely sure. So what do you have to do first? He said, and I said, I have to take an impression of your head, the whole head. He liked the idea, and when we got the materials, he came in, and he sat down in a chair comfortably, and I covered him up. There was everything cooking. After I got him covered and so that he couldn't move, I asked Bill Allen, to whom I was more friendly than the rest, to please read Fantasias Miller, which is a story written by a very famous writer. I can't think of it, but Fantasias Miller had some very interesting things, and I thought Orson should hear it.
The Kingdom of Evil by Ben Hecht. He is a gigantic man with a large head. His face is expressionless. When he looks at me, he seems made of wax. Yet he is stronger than 100 men. 100, I write. There is no limit to his strength. Again, we face him. He regards us, and we grow weak. He is like a monster that walks on the edge of a dream, calm, waxen, towering. It is impossible to approach him. I think as we stand, is he alive? What power surrounds him? See, we are all trembling before his eyes. A sense of puniness overcomes us. I can almost remember him, as if I had caught a glimpse of him moving through the annihilated streets. Yes, there's something familiar about this monster.
I made a cap to cover his head. And I disliked very much the idea of a man having a cap on his head, pushing his forehead like this, and with rubber over here. And all he does, he goes like that, and now he releases his face underneath, like I'm releasing now, for instance, and it doesn't go back like that. It goes back very slowly. What happened is that when I stretched this thing, I put it on with elastics. It's attached to him, so there's a whole series of elastics there. If he goes like this, it comes down like that.
Oh, sure, you give me.
This was so new that he let me go further and further in this.
You're in a tent, darling. You aren't at home. I can hear you very well if you speak in a normal tone of voice.
You never gave me anything in your whole life. You just tried to buy me into getting you something.
Susan!
If you weren't qualified in those days, how come the studio let you do Orson Welles' makeup?
Because they didn't think he'd ever make a movie there.
RKO didn't particularly want to spend much money on the picture. They didn't have much faith in Orson. And that's the reason why that they had said to him when we first started, you can make a few tests. Well, the tests we made were the picture, purposely. For instance, like in the projection room, this was one of their projection rooms in the studio, didn't build a set or anything. We left the film out of the projection machine, and we cranked it at 48 frames per second that's in the camera. So therefore, you get the flicker of the light coming through.
It's a good shot, Thompson, but what it needs is an angle. All we saw on that screen was that Charles Foster Kane is dead. I know that. I read the paper. You see, Thompson, it isn't enough to tell us what a man did. You've got to tell us who he was. Needs that angle. Right. Wait a minute. What were Kane's last words? Do you remember, boys?
Yes, swear.
What were the last words he said on Earth? Maybe he told us all about himself on his deathbed.
Yeah, and maybe he didn't. Maybe it was...
All we saw on that screen was a big American.
One of the biggest.
But how is he any different from Ford? Or Hearst, for that matter, or John Doe?
Yeah, sure.
I tell you, Thompson, a man's dying words.
Where are they? You don't read the papers.
RKO management thought it was a test. In reality, it was for the picture and was in the picture. The same thing held true with some of the interviews that were done, where Bill Allen was in the foreground. Some of these were small sets that were existing at the studio that had been used in some of the picture. And the studio thought that we were just making tests in these sets.
I thought maybe we could have a talk together.
Well, think again.
Orson's idea, my character, was that I was to be the inquiry of the audience. I was to be the audience asking, what is Rosebud? What this all is about? And his whole idea was that I should not intrude on the scenes, but to stay back and ask the questions so that I was almost non-existent, just a voice asking questions. Of course, to our amazement, I think to Orson's chagrin, it had just the opposite effect. I became this mysterious character who everybody knew was up to something, because otherwise, why would I be being concealed so? They kept waiting for the big payoff. I was going to be Rosebud. I was going to be something.